Good morning and welcome to the General Licensing Panel represented by Orange Bexhill. My name is Councillor Mear. This meeting is being held remotely and is being live streamed via YouTube. A recording of it will be available afterwards on our website. Councillors, officers and speakers are reminded to put their mobile phone on silent if they have one near them. Please mute your microphones and turn off your cameras when not speaking, as this will reduce feedback and background noise and saves bandwidth to prevent loss of connection. If you're a member of the panel, please leave your camera on. I will first do a roll call to check all those who are expected to attend are present. As I say your name, please turn on your microphone and confirm you are connected. First of all, members of the panel. Councillor Curtis.
Present, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Field.
Present.
And myself. Joining us today are Andy Eaton, Deputy Legal Services Manager.
Present, Chair.
Mark Randolph, Senior Environmental Health Licensing Officer.
Good morning, present.
Morning. For the review applicant, Inspector Robert Lovell, Sussex Police.
Present. Present.
PC Darren Buck, Sussex Police.
Good morning, Chair. Present.
Morning. Peter Saville of 12, is that Carlton Place Barristers, applicant's legal representative.
Good morning, Chair.
And the premises license holder, himself, Gino Forte.
Present.
Mark Poulton of Stephen Rimmer Solicitors, the premises license holder's legal representative.
Present.
And James Rankin, Barrister, the premises license holder's legal representative.
Good morning, Chairman. I'm present.
Good morning. For the responsible authority, we have Steve Biggs of the Rother Environmental Health Pollution Team.
Good morning, I'm present, thank you.
Good morning. And Philip Wright, Rother Environmental Health, Food and Safety.
Good morning, present.
Thank you. We have a representative, Councillor Christine Bayliss, Bexhill Central Ward.
Yes, present, Chair.
Good morning. And our Democratic Services Officer, our committee clerk today, is Louise Hollingsworth.
Present.
Members of the panel who wish to speak, please indicate by typing your surname only in the chat facility. Officers wishing to respond to members' questions, please type interject. It is a requirement that all members will have read the paperwork published on the website. The review application will be heard in accordance with the procedure previously issued to all parties. As the matter is a quasi-judicial hearing, the licensing lawyer will ensure that all aspects of the hearing will comply with the rules of natural justice and the Human Rights Act. During the hearing, members may wish to ask questions of the applicant, the premises licence holder or their representatives. It is not possible, unless the chairman specifically allows so, for parties to cross-examine each other. All questions need to be made through the chairman, or chair, I think we say these days. The licensing lawyer will provide any legal direction for members and representatives if necessary before members retire to make their decision. The hearing will be conducted in the following order. First of all, the licensing officer to introduce the report, then questions for clarification, then the applicant for the review, that is the Sussex Police, to present, then questions from members, then representation from the responsible authority, then questions from members, interested parties to present, questions from members again, then the premises licence holder for their submissions, including any questions to the applicant, responsible authority and interested parties. Again, questions from members, review applicant to sum up, premises licence holder to sum up, and then a decision. I think I should say that assuming that this lasts more than an hour, we will take a break at about 11 o'clock. and of course we will retire to consider our decision also. We will explain the procedure for that later when we get to it. So first of all, I call upon the licensing officer to introduce the report, please.
Councillor, we just need to go through to agenda item 1 first, please.
I am sorry. Yes, of course. The appointment of the chairman. I am being presumptuous.
Thanks, Councillor. Okay, the first item on the agenda is to appoint the chairman of the panel. Could I please have a nomination?
Proposed, Councillor Mear.
Seconded.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Mear, you are chairman of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Louise. Thank you. And the second item is, of course, the minutes of the previous meeting, to authorise me to sign the minutes of the meeting at a later date for the panel meeting held on the 21st of August as a correct record.
Agreed.
Agreed.
I assume there are no apologies for absence, Louise?
That's correct. None received, councillor.
Item 4, disclosure of interest. To receive any disclosure by members of personal interest in matters on the agenda, the nature of any interest, and whether the member regards the interest as a prejudicial matter under the terms of the Code of Conduct. Members are reminded of the need to repeat the declaration, well, prior to the item in question. We have one. Are there any declarations?
No.
None. No. And so we move to the main issue of the day, the report of the Head of Service, Environmental Services, Licensing Reviews, Community Safety, application for the review of a premises licence, the Devonshire Bar and Lounge, 4 to 5 Devonshire Square, Bexhill-on-Sea, East Sussex. And I now do call on the licensing officer to introduce his report, please.
Good morning, everybody. Just to make sure everyone's seen the 3 additional pieces of information that should have been circulated. Number 1, Police Sergeant Mosley's statement. 2, the statement provided by Mr. Forte that his legal representative will go through during their presentation, and the reduction in hours clarification that the police will go into further detail during their presentation. Okay, the report follows the standard format that you'll be familiar with, and it introduces the application for review of the premises licence made by Sussex Police. On page 1 is the introduction, and it just states that the application relates to the failure to uphold the prevention of crime and disorder and public safety licensing objectives. And a reminder that the mechanism for reviewing premises licences represents a key protection for the community where alleged problems associated with the licensing objectives occur after the grant of a premises licence. The applicant is the Sussex Police, and the premises, as you know, is the Devonshire Bar and Lounge, Devonshire Square, Bexhill. Page 2, the premises is located in the centre of Bexhill on the corner of Devonshire Road and Devonshire Square. Please see the location plan on page 11 of the report, and there's some photographs of the external of the premises on page 13, Appendix B. It's a town centre licensed premises with lay towers. It does have a current premises licence, and the premises licence at the time the review application was received is reproduced in Appendix H, page 129, with the licence plan on page 139. In summary, the premises has the benefit of a premises licence which authorises the sales supply of alcohol on and off, regulated entertainment and late night refreshment. The premises licence holder is F Forte Developments Limited. And just for information, the company's house, the directors listed on the 20th of October are Francesco Forte and Gino Forte. At the time of the review, the designated premises supervisor is Mr. Solcol Caplini, but as you'll see in the notes below, there's an update, and on the 19th of October, Mr. Forte emailed the council that he's going to give notice that of the immediate removal of the DPS, which did occur, and the premises will remain closed until further notice. Mr. Forte gave a further update on his plans for closure and the refurbishment in his statement that his legal representatives will go into further detail about. For the avoidance of doubt, the premises licence has not been surrendered, and on the 26th of October, Mr. Solcol Caplini was removed as the DPS. Page 3 of the report, some notes about the licensing history. The premises licence was granted in November 2005 following a general licensing panel hearing. There's a variation in May 2008 where additional conditions were added. Again, there was a further application to vary the licence in November 2008 and additional conditions were added then, which you will see on the premises licence that's included in the report. Forte Developments Limited have held the premises licence since September 2011. The premises licence was varied in January 2016 to add Mr. Caplini as the DPS, which, as I've described, he's now been removed. On page 3 of the report, the application for review. On the 23rd of September 2020, Sussex Police made an application on the grounds that the prevention of crime and disorder and public safety licensing objectives are not being met. The application is reproduced in full in Appendix C, page 15, with the exhibits in appendices D to D15. In summary, the grounds for review are the continued disorder, assaults and ongoing drug use within the premises. Sussex Police in the review described that they've conducted a stepped approach over the past few years, and on several occasions they've raised concerns around the management of the premises. That approach has not resulted in any sustained improvements in the levels of drug use at the premises, and then following several incidents of assault, Sussex Police has determined there is no other proportionate course of action other than a review of the premises licence. And then Sussex Police invite the General Licensing Panel to seriously consider taking the following measures. And this starts on at the bottom of page 3 and over onto page 4. 1, the removal of the designated premises supervisor. 2, the suspension of the premises licence. 3, the reduction of the late night authorised hours for licensing activities. And they are highlighted in bold on page 4. Again, reduction in hours for regulated entertainment. And then at the bottom of page 5, on behalf of the Licensing Authority, I sought clarification from Sussex Police regarding their stance on opening hours, which weren't made clear in the review application. They are described further in the reduction in hours email from Inspector Lovell. But basically, on Monday to Thursday, they're asking for the final opening hour to be 23:30 on Monday to Thursday. On Friday and Saturday, reduced from 02:30 to 00:30, and on Sunday, reduced from 00:30 to 23:30. The opening hours shown on the licence generally have no force at law, with a single exception where they are imposed by a general licensing panel following an application for the review of the licence. And you'll hear from Sussex Police that they do wish for the panel to consider the imposition of those earlier closing hours. Continuing with the action Sussex Police are looking for, and page 6 on the top, 4, premises licence conditions to be added. They are described in full in the report on page 33 onwards, but in summary, the conditions that Sussex Police wish to reinforce are regards the management, CCTV, training, age verification, incident reporting refusals, drug policy, and SIA door persons and the ID scanner. Sussex Police in their report, in their application, include exhibits which are reproduced in full in appendices D to D15, starting on page 41. 2.1, page 6, the following recent licensing related complaints, apart from music and noise complaints, are on the council's database. August 2020, a report from a member of the public that lives nearby regarding swearing and fighting, noise from patrons leaving the premises late, and allegations of out of hours opening. And in July 2020, another complaint from a member of the public that lives nearby, consistent noise, shouting from customers, arguing and fighting, glass breaking. On to number 3, page 6. The application went through the usual advertisement, and there were 2 representations made by interested parties, and these representations are reproduced in full in Appendix E, page 91. There were 2 representations made by responsible authorities, the first one being the Health and Safety Team, Rother District Council. That representation is reproduced in full in Appendix F, page 93. And the second representation was from the Pollution, the Noise Team, regarding the prevention of public nuisance licensing objective, and that representation is reproduced in Appendix G, page 103. And page 7.5, summary. The review application relates to the failures to uphold the prevention of crime and disorder and public safety licensing objectives. Representations have also been made regarding failures to uphold the prevention of public nuisance objective. And the review applicant invites the panel to consider the reviewing the premises license leading to suspension of the premises license, a reduction in late night authorised hours, and the addition of additional premises license conditions. Page 8, consideration. When considering this review application, under Section 52 of the Act, the following options, if any, are available to the panel. A, to modify the conditions of the licence. 2, to exclude a licensable activity from the scope of the licence. To suspend the licence for a period not exceeding 3 months, or to revoke the licence. Obviously, option C is not available to the panel because the DPS has been removed. I think I've covered most things in the report. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. We would proceed to questions for clarification, but is there anything to add? Are there any further updates this morning? Any agreements or offers, or anybody to add anything to what has been said by Mr. Randolph?
Chair, it may be appropriate, I think, to leave that to Mr. Saville in his submissions and Mr. Rankin in his submissions. I think at that point, unless there's a disagreement with that from either of those people, it probably would be more appropriate if they elaborate more on what they have discussed between themselves.
Thank you. We'll deal with it that way. So, first of all, members of the panel, are there questions for Mr. Randolph?
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
No. Thank you. We would then proceed to the applicant for the review, that is Sussex Police, to present their position. And could speakers please say your names before speaking so that it's clear who has spoken on each occasion. So we have Peter Saville.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. My name is Saville, as you know, appearing on behalf of Sussex Police. So you and your colleagues have a very detailed application notice with evidence in support from page 15 onwards in the papers. And the police case is that application and the evidence in support demonstrates that the licensing objectives have been undermined seriously by the carrying on of licensable activities in these premises since 2018. It's important, if I may say so, to focus on the fact that the police review application invites the subcommittee seriously to consider removal of the DPS, imposition of new conditions and amending hours. It was not the police case at this stage that revocation is something that ought to be considered. So very much the police case centred around the management of the premises, and in particular, the management of the premises under the outgoing DPS. I understand from Mr. Rankin, I'm very grateful to him for this indication, that the police evidence is not in issue. There's no dispute, no argument about what the police say has happened in these premises. I know, and I'm grateful for this fact, that you and your colleagues will have read the police paperwork very carefully. In those circumstances, I don't propose to go over again what is set out in those papers, because I know it'll be in the forefront of your minds, but also because, as Mr. Eaton referred to a moment or two ago, there has been a discussion between Mr. Rankin on behalf of the licence holder and me on behalf of the Sussex Police, in which an agreed position has been reached. And I wonder if it may be helpful for me to outline it now before I go into any greater detail.
I think that would be very helpful indeed. As the point has been made already, the DPS has gone, so you don't have to remove him, and he is, so far as the police concerned, the real lightning rod in this case. He is the catalyst for the problems that have been experienced in the premises. As I understand from Mr. Rankin, he has been, his lease of the premises has been forfeited, so there is no prospect of him coming back to the premises. And that's an important and material development. The police and the licence holder have agreed as follows, that the hours for licensable activities on Fridays and Saturdays should be cut back from 2 a.m. to 1 a.m. with 30 minutes drinking up time. So the sale of alcohol ceases at 1 a.m. That on Fridays and Saturdays there is a last entry condition as follows, that no person may enter the premises after 12:30, after 30 minutes past midnight, other than staff who've not already been admitted to the premises that night prior to 00:30. So in other words, if someone has come into the premises, goes outside to smoke or whatever, they can come back in, but otherwise the premises will be shut to newcomers after 30 minutes past midnight. And that prevents the premises from being attractive to those coming from other later night venues, because they simply won't be open to them. On Sundays to Thursdays, the terminal hour for licensable activities will remain the same, with 30 minutes drinking up time. The reason for the distinction is that the police cases that the preponderance of problems in these premises arise on Fridays and Saturdays and not midweek days. But there should also on Sunday through to Thursday be a last entry condition. So a last entry time of 23:30 to 11:30 in the same wording, save for the time, than the last entry condition in relation to Friday and Saturday. It is also agreed that all the conditions that are proposed by the police in their application are put on the licence, save that there is one minor amendment in relation to the condition relating to door staff. There's reference in that condition to major sporting, non-sporting events. The proposed and agreed wording in relation to that is all major sporting and non-sporting events
open brackets, excluding league and domestic cup fixtures, close brackets. It just provides a little clarification around what is meant by major sporting events and not. Now, in relation to the question of suspension, clearly the premises must be shut at the moment. They cannot serve alcohol or cannot be used to serve alcohol unless and until a new DPS is appointed. But in any event, I understand from Mr. Rankin that it is the premises licence holder's intention for the premises to remain shut into the new year. Perhaps he can address you further on that if necessary. But so far as concerns the police, that is an appropriate accommodation and one which the police invite you to agree to and to implement on this license. Now, so unless I can be of anything else, any further assistance, then there's nothing else I think at this stage I can say.
Well, thank you. That's very, very helpful indeed. I think the first thing would be to ask Mr. Rankin just to confirm that is what has passed between you. Mr. Rankin?
Yes, I can confirm that is so. You will have my formal undertaking on behalf of Gino Forte. The premises will remain closed until March 2021. In other words, 5 months. So far in excess of the 3 months maximum suspension that you would have been able to impose. But that is my formal undertaking on behalf of Mr. Forte.
That, as you say, that is a formal undertaking. Thank you. Now, I gather that Councillor Bayliss would like to ask a question. Councillor Bayliss, of whom would you like to ask a question?
Thank you, Chair. It was a question really of Sussex Police, because I've read the reduced hours as being midnight on Friday and Saturday, and I'm very very disappointed to hear that they've agreed an extension till 1 AM in the morning.
Sorry, Chair, if it's helpful, can I just reassure Councillor Bayliss that this isn't an agreement? It's just the parties have come to a common view in relation to what they feel is necessary, or I should use the word appropriate, moving forward. It's the committee's decision. Of course, if you disagree with those, then in your submissions you can set out why you believe they should be less than that. This agreement doesn't represent a fait accompli for the members. The members can make whatever decision they want to make based on what evidence they hear. So it may be, rather than asking the police why have they reached that decision, it may be better in your submissions to set out why you feel you don't agree with those. Unless Mr. Savile disagrees with that advice, I think that probably is the best way to deal with that.
Mr. Savile. Mr. Savile.
I'm so sorry, Chair. I certainly don't agree with the broad proposition that, of course, this is a matter for you and your colleagues to consider, and it simply is an agreement reached between the police. From the police perspective, however, it is important always to remember that one looks at the premises when one implements remedies as at the date that the remedy is implemented. Now, these premises are going to remain shut, we've heard from Mr. Rankin, until March of 2021. There will be a new DPS. We don't know who that DPS will be, but there is nothing to say either way that the problems that have been present in the premises under the current DPS will persist beyond March of 2021, and it is absolutely to be hoped that they will not. But it must follow, therefore, that if there is to be a new management team, that the evidence that points to the problems that might have justified a cut in hours or a more significant cut in hours under the old management team no longer applies. So there is a balancing act to be conducted, a balancing, or just a balance to be reached between what is proportionate and evidence-based, based upon what has gone before, and speculation about what might be in the future.
I appreciate that. I appreciate what Andy Eaton has said, that the decision is ours. We listen very carefully to what you say and to what the representatives say, what everybody says, and we certainly haven't reached any sort of decision at this stage. And I think that Mr. Eaton would probably advise us too that if different hours were imposed for the future and they were not seen to be working, there would be the possibility of further review, would there not?
Oh, certainly, certainly. But if I can put it as delicately as I can, there is much in the police view to a decision or an agreement being reached that will not be subject to any further challenge. As you will appreciate, if there were to be an appeal, and I'm not suggesting for a minute that there would, but if there were to be an appeal, that would effectively hold in abeyance any measures you imposed until that appeal was determined. So it's just it's a feature of the Act that essentially the remedy that you impose is then held off until the appeal is determined. And if the appeal is determined in favour of the appellant, then it's never imposed. So there is always a strong undercurrent of wanting to get something in place that is workable as soon as possible.
Workable and fair, and complying, of course, with all the material considerations.
Yes.
I was simply making the point that if at any time in the future, for whatever reason, the management of these premises were to be in a way falling short of those proper considerations and standards, then there would be the possibility of a further review.
Yes, certainly.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Bayliss, are you content to make your submissions later?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. If that's all from the, would we then move on to?
Chair.
Sorry, you have a question.
Sorry, Chair. I did indicate in the chat that I'd like to ask a question.
Councillor Field.
Sorry, my question is to the representative of the police, and it's about drinking up time, because I had understood that drinking up time was no longer a formal concept. Therefore, by allowing 30 minutes drinking up time, are we not in fact extending the hours beyond what you would like conditioned on the licence?
The licensable activity is the sale of alcohol rather than the consumption of alcohol. So what you have the power to control is the sale of alcohol, and that is what is reflected in the times that have been agreed. I'm not sure if that answers the question or not, but essentially the premises, there's much to be said for people drinking whatever they've got in a more measured and relaxed manner than throwing it down their necks, if I can put it bluntly, and getting out to go somewhere else to get the next one.
Nicely put.
Really. I'm sorry. But...
No, I was really thinking not just about the sale of the alcohol, but of the rest of the licensing objectives, the prevention of public disorder, etc., etc. Because clearly people need to be got out of the premises, and it just seemed to me that it's allowing an extra 30 minutes. But I'm sure we can discuss that later with our own legal advisor. But
yes, essentially, it's designed to assist dispersal, really. So not everyone is suddenly decanted onto the street, where heaven knows what they'll do. It means that people can finish their drinks at a moderate pace and then disperse accordingly.
Chair, Chair, if it helps, I mean, certainly what Councillor Field is saying is right. There is no drinking up time, but I think maybe Mr. Rankin, who may perhaps detail more about what will happen at that particular time in relation to will the premises be closed then half an hour later, or will there then be further opening for closure. But maybe Mr. Rankin is best placed to elaborate on that when we get to that particular point.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't see anybody else indicating that they wish to speak or ask questions at this point, in which case I think we should move on to the representation from responsible authority, premises license holder.
Chair, yeah, I think we'll go to Steve Biggs first, and then after Steve Biggs we'll go to Phil Wright, if that makes it just clear so that they understand which sequence will come in.
No, that's helpful. Mr. Biggs of the Rother Environmental Health Pollution Team, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yep. I won't go again as with Mr. Saville's submission. I'm not going to propose to go through all the details of the sort of history of the premises, sort of date by date, unless anyone's got any questions they want to ask me about those. But just to be general about this, we've had quite a number of complaints in the last 5 years relating to two noise aspects: amplified music from within the premises and on occasion spilling out of the doors into the street. And then latterly, particularly this year, since the easing of lockdown on July the 4th, there's been quite a number of complaints received relating to behaviour on the street, from antisocial behaviour to vandalism, violence, those sort of things, which we have passed to our police colleagues because they're matters outside of our remit, but they're still causing quite an impact on residents who live in and around Devonshire Square and the top end of Devonshire Road. You'll see we've proceeded with a number of measures since 2015 with regard to enforcement involving service of a noise abatement notice in June of 2016 for amplified music from within the premises. We'd agreed on 2 occasions, both August 2016 and again in 2018, 2 action plans with the designated premises supervisor at the time, Mr. Kaplani. Those were agreed, but they have still continued to be breached up until the point of the premises closed earlier this year. We resorted to a community protection warning in February 2018 under the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act, again because the noise from the premises from amplified music was considered to be unreasonable and causing a detrimental impact on the people who live around the premises. On all these occasions, the management have sort of just about done enough to avoid us going for either a prosecution for non-compliance with the noise abatement notice, and we have not got the evidence to establish that we could call the premises in for a review on the grounds of a breach of the public nuisance objective. So we sort of welcome the fact that there has been a departure of the most recent DPS. So going forward, I've just got a couple of other comments to make, and that relates to the operating schedule that I think was submitted by Mr. Forte. I think that's on page, it's on the last few pages, the document in black of the actual agenda, page 142. There's an operating policy been submitted. I'd quite like to see that expanded to include what we would call a noise management plan, which could be potentially conditioned, should the panel decide this is necessary, to include sort of basically a noise management plan to deal with noise from amplified music from within the premises and the noise from the patrons outside when they've had some drinks, and other aspects of noise from the premises. So that would need to be prepared probably by a competent acoustic consultant, and look at and identify practical measures and management control techniques to deal with noise issues that we've experienced in the past. This can be then perhaps submitted to us for approval. We're quite happy to work with Mr. Forte and his team on agreeing these measures, but I'd quite like to see that put in, or certainly recommend that be put in addition to the operating policies for the other areas that have been raised. The only other clarification point I'd quite like is relating to the licensable activities that at the times of the licensable activities that were agreed or discussed by Mr. Saville and Mr. Rankin was regard to the provision of regulated entertainment. I'm presuming that Mr. Rankin and Mr. Forte would like the regulated entertainment to continue until the hours of the actual sale of alcohol, rather than a cessation at 2300 hours, which is what we would probably prefer to see at this stage. And I'm talking about regulated entertainment, which comprises amplified music and voice primarily. And that's my sort of submission at this stage, really. If anyone's got any questions, I'm more than happy to answer those. So I'm not actually hearing.
Muted, Chair.
You're muted.
Yes, are there questions of Mr. Biggs? I think Councillor Field, were you going to ask a question?
No, thank you. I asked my question to the previous person.
So are there any other questions for Mr. Biggs, please?
No, Chair.
Mr. Saville?
No, thank you, Chair.
And Mr. Rankin, no questions?
No questions other than to state that the agreement that Mr. Saville and I have relates to all licensable activities, including regulated entertainment. So the agreement is predicated on those activities being able to continue until the terminal hour.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Biggs. Which will bring us on to Philip Wright, Rother Environmental Health, Food and Safety.
Hello, good morning. As you may be aware, the food and safety team have responsibility for health and safety in premises such as the Devonshire. At the beginning of October, I was asked to contact the DPS and the premise license holder regarding their risk assessments, particularly for COVID, given the current circumstances that we face. On the 6th of October, the letter went out requesting that information, and shortly afterwards, on the 12th of October, I received an email reply from the DPS, Mr. Kaplani, details of which are all in Appendix F. He supplied a risk assessment for COVID. My response, or rather my comments, are also in Appendix F, but the long and short of it is, it looks like I feel that the risk assessment wasn't adequate, and it simply appears that the gentleman has lifted it from elsewhere and called it his own. And the reason that I felt that way was it was very generic in its approach. For example, where you may expect specifics regarding entry and exit at the moment, for example, one-way systems. There was nothing mentioned in that. It was literally just generic comments. And again, the risk assessments that Mr. Kaplani supplied, again, is in Appendix F. But for example, knowing Devonshire, having conducted food hygiene inspections there in the past, there is within the premise, there is, for example, the opportunity to implement a one-way system to try and minimise potential risks and transmission from COVID. Yet there's no mention of that within the premise, within the risk assessment document that was supplied, and other bits that also concerned me as well, being reasonably familiar with the premise, having been into it, as I say, fairly recently for food hygiene work, and also looking at the plan itself, which married up with my recollections of the premise. The figure of 75 people within the premise, I think, was ambitious to say the least, and again, contributed to my opinion that so I don't think the gentleman had done the risk assessment properly or competently, and simply thought, I've found this, this will do, and this will and that's what he sent through to the local authority. Hopefully, with the removal of the DPS, the next management that comes in will do a better job. So I think that probably ends my comments. If anyone has any questions.
Does anyone have any questions of Mr. Wright?
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
Councillor Curtis, are you indicating?
No.
No. Mr. Rankin, do you wish to ask any questions?
No questions, Chair. Thank you.
No. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Wright.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So, interested parties to present is where we go from here. So that would be,
Chair, it will be Councillor Bayliss. I think she's representing a number of different people.
I see her now. She's appeared. Councillor Bayliss has appeared on my screen. Hello again, Councillor Bayliss. Yes, the floor is yours.
Right, thank you very much. Well, I'm the district councillor for the area where the Devonshire Bar and Lounge is situated. I've received certainly over the last few months since lockdown ceased, a number of complaints about the operation of the Devonshire Bar and Hotel. In particular, I was asked to go and visit a young mother who lives opposite the premises in a block of flats at the top of Western Road. She really came across as somebody who was completely at her wit's end. She was struggling to sleep. She'd had a baby about a week into lockdown, and with no support really from health visitors, couldn't have her parents around. It was really, really suffering. And on top of all of that, it sort of became party time at the Devonshire Bar and Lounge when lockdown was lifted in July. And as you've seen from all the police statements and what have you, there were a series of incidents, and she showed me a video of fights and the police attending those premises. I asked her whether she had raised the issue with anyone in particular, and of course, I think everyone in Bexhill knows that Mr. Forte is the owner of the premises and had raised the issue with him. She'd raised it with him on one of our local Facebook groups, which is a well-known group called Parking in Bexhill Like a Twat, and concerns driving offences and people driving around late at night. She'd raised the issue about noise with him, and he was very dismissive. I mean, it's still all live on Facebook today, this morning, and I can read it off to you. But he dismissed her complaints and said, "Can you not watch me?" He accused her of being a stalker, and as I say, dismissed it completely. And there are ruder posts which I won't read out. So as I say, she had raised it with the owner of the premises, who's here this morning. When I finished visiting with the young mum, I bumped into another resident from that particular block on my way out. Somebody I'd knew and mentioned to him, asked him, if he had had any issues with the Devonshire Bar and Lounge, and he said that it had been extremely noisy and disruptive since lockdown. But what can you do? And I also spoke to a resident of an adjoining property a couple of months ago, and he again said that whilst it had a long history since the sort of later night openings of being a sort of noisy venue, it had been particularly bad since lockdown had ceased. I also that was one set of complaints. I'd also had another email from another resident of one of the flats in Devonshire Road, which is on the other side of the road, about regular instances of fighting. This is a young man, 17, 18, who'd witnessed fighting, arguing, smashed bottles, had seen somebody smash a bottle and then hold the jagged glass to somebody's neck right outside, his bedroom window in the earliest hours of the morning. I've also been into the block of flats. So if you look at the photograph of the Devonshire Hotel, Bar and Lounge, you'll see that the top floors are, there are flats, and there are about 16 flats. I've had a long conversation with Mr. Connolly, who's the chair of the Residents Association there, who sort of detailed, and I think he's also supplied evidence, detailed a sort of long history of complaints. But their freeholder is the same as the owner of the pub, and I think his father. So the two Forte gentlemen who are part of that development also are the freeholders and the managing agents for the block. And this, this sort of creates a bit of tension because obviously they don't want to raise or create too much of a fuss. And I think that is indicated by the sort of lack actually of people stepping forward to give evidence on the basis that I will speak up for them without identifying them. So all in all, I think everybody realises that in Devonshire Square and Devonshire House that the pub's been there an awful long time, and nobody wants to see it close as a public house. Indeed, when it was announced it was closing, there was a whole lot of people on Facebook who were really, really sad and upset about it closing. And it seems to me it's a sort of Jekyll and Hyde type operation. You've got a lot of daytime trade running perfectly normally, a really good thriving business, and then this nighttime trade which sort of carries on into the early hours of the morning. And as I say, I actually I've come here today to actually argue that we should be taking this back to what should be a sort of traditional, what I call traditional pub opening hours. So I would say that all activity or all sale of alcohol or whatever should cease at 2300 hours. I wouldn't actually have any extension on that until it can be proved that this pub can be run properly and responsibly, and then possibly we could look at sort of a further extension. But I think the evidence before you of drug taking, fighting, just a disregard for the COVID regulations, the fact that the owner of the pub, Gino Forte, has been there on regular occasions during the evening, late at night, just indicates to me that this does need to be really tightly controlled, given a period of, if you like, let's probation period, I would argue for, and then after a year let's see if we can extend it and develop it. If we can run it sensibly without fighting closing at 11 o'clock at night, great. So that's my evidence, and I'm happy to take any questions from anybody.
Well, yes, thank you. Yes, are there any questions? Members of the panel first. Any questions of Councillor Bayliss?
No, thank you.
Councillor Curtis?
Yes, Chair, thank you. Councillor, in your opinion, what do you feel would be a responsible action that would, I can't think of my word at the moment, to alleviate this issue after midnight with this bad behaviour? What do you think could be done by the owners that would have a satisfactory effect on it?
Councillor Curtis, I mean, I'm not an expert in running pubs or or licensing laws. I just picked up the issues as I see them. And I would say that I genuinely think I don't want to see it close the pub. I want it to turn into anything else. I think it's been there a long time, but I just think we should rein back on the hours, allow the pub to be run as if you like, in a traditional way. I mean, I would want it to close at 2300 hours every evening, but I mean, I'm willing to accept that maybe later opening till midnight, which was the original police proposal, because I think that's sensible, but for Fridays and Saturday nights. But I would really urge panel members not to allow it to open till 1 in the morning. I just think this is just going to, over time, carry on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Do either of the representatives, legal representatives, wish to ask questions? Mr. Rankin or Mr. Saville?
Thank you, no, Councillor.
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Chair, can I suggest at this moment, given it's 11 o'clock, and just before Mr. Rankin makes his submissions, and it will give Mr. Rankin an opportunity to just absorb some of the things which has been said before he sets out the premises license holder's case. Can I suggest we just take a 10-minute break?
I think that would be an excellent idea, and that's what we suggested at the outset. Yes, yes, please. So
it's very, very important that everybody remains in the meeting. We're just going to move away from it, and then obviously we come back and we resume at 10 past 11.
10 past 11, we remain in the meeting. We may switch off our cameras and microphones. Welcome back, everybody, to this licensing panel meeting. We are now going to continue with the submissions from the premises licence holder, which will be Mr. Rankin, please.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. You're going to need a bit of background about Gino Forti. He's a local man. He lives locally. A generous sponsor of Sidley United Football Club in their ambitions to join the Premier League. Unlikely. He took over these premises in 2006. They've been there, as Councillor Bayliss has already indicated, for many, many years. And they have been through a variety of changes. And when Gino Forti took them over in 2006, they were what I'm going to call a robust public house. And he set about the business of changing them into a select bar lounge. And he did that by being extremely selective with the customers that came to his premises. And over a period of some 4 years, he built up an extremely good and selective business. And he did that by barring as many as 200 people in that time. He then let the premises out to the reshoot chain, who run nice restaurants, many of them in London. And they tried a restaurant called Zippers, which was unsuccessful. It was only there for 8 months or so. And then Gino Forti took the premises back. He, during that time, had applied for an extension of the hours, and they were granted their 2 a.m. in 2008. So they have had this extension now for some 12 years. And during the tenure of Gino Forti, the premises did not cause issues that concerned the police. There were odd niggles, and they were addressed and sorted out. The problem arose in 2005 when Gino Forti granted a lease to the two Kaplanis, Albanian gentlemen, one Artur and the other Sokol. And they completely changed the business model that Mr. Forti had so carefully built up over those years. And the brothers admitted back to the premises all those who had been barred. A set of premises under Gino Forti's management that were granted a license to use their logo by the Moët et Chandon Champagne House, changed into a set of premises over the next few years that attracted, and there's no escaping this, all of the lowlife that had been excluded from the premises over the years of Gino Forti's tenure. And back they all came. And the approach that the two Kaplanis brothers took was that turnover appeared to be more important than selectivity. And the result was that sales of cocktails and champagnes went through the floor, and sales of cheap beer, particularly lager, went through the roof. And that comes at a cost. It's one thing to increase your turnover, but if you're going to be attracting the sorts of people that nobody would want in their premises, then inevitably that is going to cause trouble. Now, when Mr. Forti, because in the past the police had contacted Mr. Forti, his company, after all, is the premises license holder. And there is, for example, mention of a meeting on the 23rd of January 2018 in the police application for review. And when Gino Forti was informed about issues, he was then able, with the Kaplani brothers, to address them. But then there was silence, and Gino Forti was no longer copied in on the emails and was no longer contacted by the police, and the police dealt directly with the Kaplani brothers. I'm not suggesting for a moment that is a criticism of the way the police addressed the management of the premises. It may have been that it was a sensible thing to do because the Kaplani brothers were the people that were in day-to-day control. They'd taken a 5-year lease. It was a full repairing lease. Gino Forti was simply their landlord. But if the police had approached Mr. Forti earlier and suggested that there was a problem, then he would immediately have taken steps. Now, the example of that is the application for review, which was lodged in September, late September. I have to say it came as a surprise to Mr. Forti. He immediately instructed me. We sat down and we discussed the police evidence, and we discussed what the way forward was. And it seemed to me that the way forward, expensive as it was for Mr. Forti to contemplate, was to forfeit the lease for the Kaplani brothers. And that came at a financial penalty. Mr. Forti was receiving rent from the Kaplani brothers, and he has willingly deprived himself of that and taken the premises back. Now, he has done a number of things in taking the premises back. The first of these is to close the premises, because it's recognized that when you've got a set of premises that have developed over a period of time a reputation for being premises that have attracted the wrong sort of people, that have attracted people that use drugs and sell drugs and fight and get drunk and the rest of it, then there has to be a period of quietening down where the old premises dies and the phoenix rises from the ashes. Now, in preparation for that phoenix rising again and resuming the old trouble-free management of Mr. Forti, he is in the process of spending £100,000 on refurbishing the premises, completely rebranding them, and restoring them to what they were, not what the Kaplani brothers turned them into. And this involves an approach which completely detaches himself from any of the history that the Kaplani brothers imprinted on the premises. Not a single member of staff will be employed at the premises that was employed under the regime of the brothers. I have to say this, that when Gino Forti ran the premises, he employed excellent staff. They were well paid, well rewarded, and they treated everybody well. They went on to other jobs. Two of them, dare I say this, went to Rother District Council, and another one went to Eastbourne District Council. They began new lives fortified by the experience that they had had at these premises. Now, in addition to that, Mr. Forti has introduced a new CCTV system, which is a state-of-the-art system. It's got 32 internal cameras and 16 external cameras. It is of such high quality that your licensing officer, Tom Beasley, was moved to say this, that it is the best equipment that he has ever seen. The picture quality is absolutely pinpoint sharp. Now, in addition to that, what he has introduced is a complete overhaul of the drug policies, because clearly the brothers were unable to address to any meaningful way the problem of drugs in these premises. And you will see at pages 146 to 142 to 148, a number of policies there. I take on board entirely what Steve Biggs says in relation to the sound management problem, and that he would like to see these beefed up with a noise management plan. I'm perfectly happy to do that. I should say this, that so far as noise escape is concerned, it's another example of Mr. Forti, when he's aware of a problem, addressing it. So in 2016, when Mr. Forti was made aware that there was a noise escape problem, he commenced installation of noise attenuation features, which included a £30,000 acoustic ceiling, £10,000 worth of new equipment, which had the effect of installing a number of smaller speakers throughout the premises, as opposed to having large speakers that you have to crank up in order to generate the same volume that the smaller speakers do. And he installed a noise limiter. And there was a certain amount of toing and froing about setting the limit on that noise limiter. Mr. Forti says this to me, that we're perfectly happy to install a new noise limiter. We would welcome the assistance of Mr. Biggs in setting the appropriate level once and for all. And this would involve a certain amount of goodwill on behalf of residents as well, because we would like to involve them in the process so that we're able, with the use of our noise man, to set the levels that are the entirely appropriate levels. And you'll know that noise limiting devices now are sophisticated, and you can digitally lock them. So the only person that has access to the noise limiter and the setting of the levels, raising or lowering them, would be the acoustician himself, not anybody that's involved with the management of the premises, not the freeholder. No one else can access the noise limiter. So we hope that in the forthcoming 5 months, we are able to knock the whole issue of noise escape firmly on the head. I'm fortified by the representation from Mr. Biggs, which seems to indicate that there has been no issue in relation to noise escape for over a year now. I believe that the last incident relating to noise escape was September 2019. So I hope that that, on the face of it, has been addressed. But as a belt and braces approach over the coming 5 months, we're happy, in conjunction with Mr. Biggs, to eventually, finally, terminally lay the issue of noise escape to rest. Can I deal with what Councillor Bayliss has said to you? And I'm going to grasp this nettle from the outset. Facebook is never an appropriate forum for discussing important matters. If there is an issue with somebody parking, or if there's an issue with somebody revving their car engine, which I'm afraid seems to be the case with Mr. Forte, then the appropriate thing to do is not to take to Facebook. And I accept that that exchange between Mr. Forte and the young mother was discourteous, and for that I apologise. It's been some time since I was left in charge of a small child, but I'm aware of the fact that it's a particularly stressful time, and Councillor Bayliss has told us of the background of this young mother who did not have the support that otherwise she would normally have had. And I'm sorry for that, and I'm sorry if there was any discourtesy. So, coming back then to what he proposes to do and has already done. The closure of the premises, if it needs a repetition during this representation of my undertaking that the premises will be closed, they will be closed for 5 months until March 2021. And I've mentioned already that if you were going to impose suspension, for example, of the licence, then the maximum term of suspension that Parliament allows you is 3 months. So what we're voluntarily giving you is a closure of these premises for 5 months. In other words, far in excess of the power that you possessed under the Act in any event. Now, I'm going to take you to the dispersal policy, because Councillor Field correctly indicated that drinking up time was no longer a thing. And it's, I'm afraid, just a mark of how long I am in the tooth, and Mr. Saville perhaps is guilty of that as well. We use it as a helpful phrase to identify what is now called opening hours. One used to call it drinking up time, and I still cannot rid myself of the habit of calling it drinking up time. We all know what we mean by it. That is that licensable activities go up to a terminal hour, and then there is a winding down period. Can I, with apologies, take you to the dispersal policy? I know that you've already read it, but it's as well in these circumstances just to underline just what it is that we propose. There's an indication at page 146 and an acknowledgement that there are residents that live in the area and that respect must be shown to them. And this is the second paragraph. I don't know if you've got it on paper like I have, or on screen like others have. I got it on paper because that's, I'm afraid, the only way I can operate. Management are aware of the potential for neighbourhood noise and disturbance at the time that customers leave at closing time. Management have agreed to implement a written dispersal policy to move customers from the premises and the immediate vicinity in such a way so as to cause minimum disturbance or nuisance to neighbours. Every effort will be made to minimise any potential nuisance, and it will be the responsibility of all members of staff to support this policy. Now, just pausing there, remember that there were 8 years that Gino Forte ran these premises where dispersal was not an issue. There were 5 years that the Kaplani brothers ran these premises where dispersal clearly was an issue. Clearly, people were leaving these premises in drink, and clearly fights were taking place. Alarming to hear that somebody had a broken bottle placed to their neck. These are things that should never happen, and never happened under Mr. Fortey's watch. So, winding down period. It's an important feature of the dispersal policy that we have this winding down period. Mr. Savile's already indicated the importance of not decanting, nice word, everybody onto the pavement at a particular time, that it's much better that you have a staggered dispersal. So management have put into place an effective wind down procedure in order to facilitate prompt closure of the premises and orderly dispersal. At closing, additional staff are directed to work in the customer areas near the front/rear entrance. Customers are informed that the premises are about to close and are directed towards the exit. Just pausing there. The use of music in a winding down period is important. Mr. Fortey will not be operating these premises as a nightclub, so there will be no dance floor in them. The music that will be played at such a level, obviously not to disturb residents upstairs and not to escape from the front of the premises. But you can use music very effectively to wind people down, and you turn the music down, you raise the lights up very gradually. And what that does is encourage a gradual drift from the premises. We are proud of our building and the area we work in. We will endeavour to keep the area clean and attractive for our patrons and our neighbours. This means dealing with debris outside our frontage that may have nothing to do with us, but in the interests of maintaining good standards in the area, we will still clear it up. When applicable, and this is really important to the winding down period, this is page 147 at the top. When applicable, a door supervisor shall be maintained until 30 minutes after the premises are closed. So on Fridays and Saturdays, regulated and licensable activities end at 1 o'clock. Then there is a 30-minute winding down period. And beyond that, for a further 30 minutes, door staff remain employed by the premises, performing their duty, way beyond the actual closure of the premises. The doorman is trained to know where the nearest mode of public transport is, details of taxis and a number is available at reception, general local knowledge, etc. The doorman's duties are split between supervising the dispersal and the general control in the vicinity. So it isn't just a question of getting them out onto the street and the responsibility ends there. Mr. Fortey has employed an excellent firm called Apex. Mr. Fortey has a nightclub, now closed because of COVID, in Eastbourne, about which there is no complaint. He has an excellent relationship with Apex Security, a first-class firm, and he will be employing them to run these premises. And you may well have come across in your time sitting on this committee premises that have simply said, oh, once they're outside, it's nothing to do with us. That isn't the approach that Mr. Fortey takes. He accepts that there is a responsibility to the vicinity as well as to the immediate curtilage of the premises. The doorman's duties require that he be easily identifiable. Obviously, it's an obvious point. There is an end-of-night team meeting to discuss any ways that the premises may improve the dispersal of patrons, and any actions points are communicated to the doorman. Then there are notices and incident reports and training. Now, that is a comprehensive list of protocols that have worked well with the embassy and will work well with these premises. It's tempting, I know, for Councillor Bayliss to say, well, put them on probation. That, I'm afraid, ignores commercial reality. That for a premises such as this, where you're attracting people to come and eat there, or people to come after they have eaten elsewhere, you need a slightly later hour than a public house. And if it opens at only half cock, in other words, if it opens just with a restricted hour of 11 o'clock, as Councillor Bayliss urges, then the commercial realities mean that the premises are unable to trade effectively. They require the additional hours as agreed between the police and ourselves. You, Chairman, have made an excellent point that review in the future, if Mr. Forte was to breach any undertaking, was to breach any statement of intention, he would be brought back, I imagine, without hesitation by Inspector Lovell, brought before you and asked to explain why, through me, he said he would do X, Y, and Z, and yet failed to do it. I would have the greatest difficulty appearing for Mr. Forte in those circumstances. I have said that this is what he will do. He will tell you that this is what he will do. And if he fails to do that, he has nobody else to blame except himself. So there effectively is our application. What were the other matters that were raised? I think that was it. Simply to indicate that we're happy to give an undertaking to include in our dispersal policy a noise management plan, and we will get our acoustic expert to liaise with Mr. Biggs and give him a noise management plan, and that would involve the resetting, with apologies to Mr. Biggs, because I know he's done this before, our new limiter in replacement of the old. Now, I'm conscious of the fact that I've taken this really quickly. I've got with me Mr. Forte, who, yes, so I've got him with me if you want to ask him any questions. If I can ask him and Mr. Poulton to put their camera on. And I throw myself on the committee and invite you to ask me questions and anybody else.
Well, thank you very much indeed. I see that Councillor Fields does have a question, and we'll take it from there.
Actually, Chair, I've got 4, if that's okay. First is general, and it probably is actually for Mr. Eaton, but I just need, and could I just start off by thanking Mr. Rankin for his explanation. That was really useful and helpful. Thank you very much. First of all, does a landlord have any responsibility at all for what his tenants do in his premises, is my first question. My second question that I don't understand is how Mr. Forte could remain in ignorance of what was going on in the Devonshire when it was run by the Kaplanis. And I know that sounds historic, but in my mind, it's relevant to future behaviour and indications of the future. How could he remain in ignorance when it seems large parts of Bexhill knew what was going on? My fourth question is about the new systems, and very impressive that it's state of the art. But of course, any system is only as good as the human being behind the operation of it. And how can we be assured that that will be carried out effectively? And my fourth question is going back to the revving, and I realise that Facebook isn't a particularly reliable source of information always, but I think we need to bear in mind Councillor Bayliss's comments about the residents of Mr. Forte's premises perhaps having a worry about direct confrontation. If those comments were dismissed, how can we be sure that in the future relationships will be courteous between Mr. Forte and his tenants and the council and his customers? That's my 4. Thank you very much.
Mr. Rankin, did you get those all down?
I'm going to do them in reverse order. That I've apologised for the discourtesy shown by Mr. Forte, and I am sorry that that happened, and I wish that it hadn't happened, and I imagine that Mr. Forte wishes it hadn't happened either. But sometimes, and this is why social media is such an inappropriate means of communication, because everybody then jumps on it, and one becomes defensive or offensive, and the rest of it. It's far better that this lady picks up a telephone and telephones Mr. Forte and explains that she has an issue, and it's not an indicator of future behaviour. There is much at stake here, and Mr. Forte knows better than I do the importance of being a man of his word. The second but last point that you made related to the new system. You're absolutely right. A system is only as good as the person that operates it. But by system, I'm assuming, Councillor Field, that you meant that the operating system, or was it actual the system, the acoustic system?
I was talking about the CCTV, the acoustic system, anything that needs manual operation in order to comply with any conditions which might be placed on the licence.
Right. Well, CCTV is an easy one because you simply turn the thing on, and the state-of-the-art equipment records for a minimum of 31 days in picture-perfect quality, which is then, you'll see that there's a comprehensive list of conditions that have been proposed and accepted by us. Each and every one, save for the amendment as outlined by Mr. Saville. Each and every one of those conditions has been accepted, and the detail on the condition relating to the do's and don'ts for CCTV has been spelt out. If Mr. Forte breaches that, then again, he has himself to blame. In relation to sound systems, well, as I've explained, the noise limiter effectively locks the level of sound in the premises, and that cannot be interfered with. So that will be a level set by an independent environmental health officer and an independent acoustic officer. And Mr. Forte has no input into that. So the chances of that system failing are impossible. And then the question of a landlord's responsibility for his tenants relates really to knowledge. I mean, should a landlord be there every single night? Should a landlord be telephoning the police? But what Mr. Forte knows is that in the past, the police, when they have had an issue with these problems, with these premises, have contacted him. He used, for example, on the drugs test, you've heard about the drugs test that were conducted at the premises, and the premises showed improvement, and then they didn't show improvement, and they were worse, and then they got better, and then they got worse. Mr. Forte used to be copied into those emails, and there came a stage about 2 years ago when Mr. Forte was no longer copied in on the emails. And the last contact that Mr. Forte had from the police was March. This is before the service of the application for review, was March this year. And he was unaware of the depth of feeling that the police had in relation to these premises. If for a second Mr. Forte had known the full extent of what was going on, his position is that I would have acted absolutely immediately. For example, when I got the application for review, I acted absolutely immediately. So this isn't just a question of a landlord turning a blind eye to what was going on at the premises. He certainly is hands off. It's not as if Mr. Keplani and his brothers were employees of him and therefore directly responsible. But what seems to be clear is that not only were the police not contacting Mr. Forte, but Mr. Keplani and his brother were not communicating the full extent of the unhappiness that the police were exhibiting. Mr. Forte, I'm going to ask you to join in at this stage, because I don't want it said that you what was going on at the premises. Can you help us on that?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yes. Can you help us? Because Councillor Curtis says this, that to what extent did you know what was going on at the premises? I've used the phrase, did you shut your eyes to what was going on? Did you know? Help us on that.
Yes, for me, in terms of the use of the Devonshire for myself, for me it was more of a coffee lounge environment in the day where I would go and use the Wi-Fi, relax, check emails, conduct my other business. You know, I'd have if I required a place to meet anybody in Bexhill, I would do it there because it was a very comfortable environment during the day. In terms of the night time, obviously, as Mr. Rankins explained to you, I operate a nightclub in Eastbourne, and my attentions are there on a Friday and Saturday night. So, and I have a fantastic relationship, which I believe with Sussex Police. You know, they have my mobile number. I'm in contact with them regularly if they need me, and any time that I was contacted about any misdemeanor, any concerns at the Devonshire, be it high drugs, readings, fighting, antisocial behaviour, it was absolutely my intention and belief that I would sort it, because I don't want anything operating in the town which can sort of be a representation of me, and that's the important part. So, for example, when the police asked us, you know, they felt there was an issue with the door staff, the door security company. We checked, which originally was Samurai Security, which was again nominated by the police to us in the first instance when we took the premises back. They questioned their ability to control the issues. So we said to them, okay, who would you like? And they requested Mark 1 Security, who have many doors in Eastbourne and locally. So immediately, at a greater cost to the tenant, an hourly rate, a greater hourly rate, that company was imposed on the tenant. So that's an example. Another measure we did was ensure that the tenant implemented what is known as an ID scanner. So anybody that comes on a Friday and Saturday night can scan their ID, driving license, passport, etc., and it records their personal details, which allows them to be traced or, you know, record their attendance. So if there's any antisocial behaviour or crime and disorder, they can be found later on in conjunction with the photograph and also the CCTV statements, etc. We always hope, well, it's in my intention, that these measures are in place to lead to a prosecution of people who do wrong in a public place, which is how it should be. You know, I can't stress, you know, enough that in March of this year, as even the drug readings in the report, etc., they're you know, I'm not going to say there was evidence, but it clearly showed, you know, a declining, you know, sort of this sort of pattern, but it was decreasing from the original position, as so I thought. And the minute, this is the bit that I really would like to stress, the minute that it was seen that it was beyond all repair what was going on there, which again was alien to me, I will be honest, the lease was forfeited immediately. You know, the DPS, Mr. Keplani, and his brother, who had the leasehold interest, was removed from the premises, and it was shut immediately. You know, I don't put financial gain over the safety of people in Bexhill. I never would, and I never have. For me, it's not about that. The Devonshire to me is about what I created it for in the beginning, those years ago, was somewhere to stop the nighttime economy migrating to Hastings or Eastbourne, and providing a service and a product so good you know, that could rival. One of the things people always used to say to me was, oh, you know, the Devonshire could be landed anywhere, London, Brighton, and it would hold its own, and I'm really proud of that. But, you know, as Mr. Ranking, James pointed out, that once the tenant operator had taken it too far, that was the end. We you know, sorry to coin the phrase, we called time, and it was time for them to go. So to the detriment of myself, I'm now, you know, without any rent from the premises until March, and I'm quite prepared to do that to put everybody's mind at rest. And I'm really looking forward to embarking on a refurbishment program to give Bexhill, you know, a flagship premises, you know, like my company and myself have done in Eastbourne. We took a troubled nightclub with a terrible history, far worse than the Devonshire by any stretch of the imagination, and we've turned that into something which I believe Eastbourne could be proud of. And that's what I'm looking to do here again in Bexhill. But as James, Mr. Ranking has pointed out, you know, it does require that 1 o'clock, and we will do, you know, you have my personal undertaking that I personally will police that premises to ensure that it adheres to every condition we had today, and that it is seamless trading, that you won't even know it's open till 1 o'clock in the morning should you be a local resident. And I welcome the local residents to use it, you know, and that's it. Anybody is welcome as long as they dress accordingly and they behave accordingly. You know, I always say to my staff, you know, imagine that your mother or someone that you hold so very dear to yourself is sitting and drinking in the premises. Would you want that person that's walking in to buy a drink sitting next to your family member? If you say yes, proceed. If the answer is no, persona non grata, goodbye. And that's as simple as that. Well, I will never put, you know, turnover ahead of the licensing objectives and the product we're offering. So I hope that sort of clarifies things from my perspective.
Does that answer your questions, Councillor Field?
Yes, more or less, but I was just really left wondering why, given that Mr. Forte acted eventually, why he didn't take those actions while he was still being copied in to the issues by the police, i.e. earlier.
Well, the copying in of Mr. Forte on the emails related to the drug tests that were taking place at the premises. It didn't relate to the behaviour in that really bad July when lockdown ended and people were behaving badly out in the street. There was no information flowing from the police relating to that. And the only indication was a drug test, which was showing that the levels seemed to be relatively stable. So there was nothing at that stage, I would suggest, that would have tipped Mr. Forte off. If there was an email from Inspector Lovell or any of the other excellent officers, such as Darren Buck, saying, Gino, that these premises have a real issue with drunkenness. People are knocking 8 bells out of each other on a Friday and a Saturday night. Something needs to be done. He would have done that, but there is no such email. There is no such communication. So knowledge is key. And the moment that Mr. Forte became aware, that is the moment that he acted.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else indicating. Councillor Curtis, no questions? Thank you. Then I think we call upon the review applicant to sum up. That would be Mr. Saville.
Thank you, Chair. You have heard a significant amount of information this morning, but you've also heard that the police, so far as they're concerned, are content to proceed on the basis of the agreement that they have reached with the licence holder. It is clearly the case that things got to a very, very bad state of affairs in the running of these premises, such that licensing objectives were seriously undermined. Nuisance disturbance was caused to those who live and work around the premises. That is unacceptable. And as you have already pointed out, sir, the police not only have the ability to bring a further application for review should matters deteriorate, but they will not hesitate to do so. That being said, every decision that a licensing authority makes must be evidence-based. The evidence gathered by the police points to the way in which these premises were managed by the outgoing DPS. You have heard that the premises will now remain closed for something in the order of 5 months. It must be right that the police wait to see whether the problems that have blighted these premises over the last few years pass with the outgoing DPS, or whether they return in any form. At this stage, the police simply cannot say that those problems will return. They must wait and see, and that is what they will do. That is why they have reached the agreement they have with the license holder. And it is an agreement which, with the greatest respect, the police invite you to approve and endorse. Sensibly, there's little else I can add.
Well, thank you. Now, are there any questions for Mr. Saville? Nobody's indicating on my chat. No, thank you. Mr. Rankin, is there anything further that you wish to say?
Chair, sorry, Chair. Just before we can we go back to the two responsible authorities and to the IPs to sum up as well before we give the final word to Mr. Rankin?
Certainly. So the two review authorities being the other environmental health, you mean?
Yes, Chair. Mr. Biggs and Mr. Wright, and then we'll finish with Councillor Bayliss before we give the final word to Mr. Rankin. So
Mr. Biggs first, then, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm in agreement with Mr. Saville and Mr. Rankin, where we can go forward with regard to the noise issues from the amplified music and the sort of behaviour of patrons. The only other thing I would add is that if Mr. Forte or his team can probably contact us with regard to whatever equipment they're planning to install before they spend any money, just to make sure we're all sort of singing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak, so we know it's going to achieve what we all want to achieve. So say any contact liaison will be welcomed sort of in the coming months to get to that position. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any questions. No questions then, thank you. So then it would be Mr. Wright. Mr. Wright, please.
Hello there. As regards to the information that I received, it's all in relation to Mr. Kaplani, who is no longer there. And what I would like to see moving forward would be responsible documentation, responsible implementation of COVID secure measures. Who knows where we will be in March when things may be quite different, but essentially my comments relate to Mr. Kaplani, who is no longer there. As I said, I can just reiterate that whoever is there in future, I would like to see it done properly.
Thank you for that. I don't see anyone indicating for questions, so thank you very much, Mr. Wright. Thank you. So we do now move back, I believe, to Mr. Rankin to sum up.
Sorry, Chair.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Bayliss needs to speak.
How could I forget you? I do apologise.
Thank you very much. Well, I would just urge the panel to go along with the original proposal from Sussex Police, which is to ensure that the premises close at midnight on Fridays and Saturdays, and 11 o'clock on for the rest of the week. I think that's given the circumstances that residents have faced, and given that Mr. Forte, was aware of obviously some of the noise issues concerning the clientele as they were piling out of the pub late at night after 11 o'clock at night. I mean, that's quite clearly demonstrated. I think, as I say, it's a well-loved, well-used pub, and I don't want to obviously stop it being a pub. I want it to continue, but I think, given the circumstances of the awful, disturbance and nuisance that residents have suffered, that we stick to the hours in the application and do not go to 1 o'clock in the morning, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bayliss. And we do now, I think, go to Mr. Rankin.
Although I see Mark Randolph has his hand up.
That has not appeared on my screen. Mr. Randolph, do you have something to say?
Yes, just some housekeeping before Mr. Rankin concludes. Members, when they go away to consider the report and the discussions today, might notice that the licence plan just shows the ground floor. But on page 137, which contains the conditions on the licence, it does reference a capacity limit of 60 persons in the basement, and then a condition above that regarding regular entertainment in the basement. I just wonder if there's an opportunity. I don't think Mr. Forte's used the basement for many years. There might be an opportunity for Mr. Forte to ask for those conditions to be removed about the basement and agree that the basement won't be used for any licensable activities.
I've taken instructions, and we're happy for you to remove the basement from the ambit of the licensed area. So the licensing of these premises, which I stress are not a pub, they're a lounge bar, would be restricted simply to the ground floor. You've been very patient, and I thank you for that. And I thank you for the courtesy that I've been shown. I thank you also, the police, for the pragmatic approach that has been taken, and all of the responsible authorities. We have to find a way forward. The answer isn't simply to press the nuclear button and remove hours that have been in place since 2008. Without some form of justification for that. If I was representing Mr. Kaplani, and Mr. Kaplani was saying, oh, it wasn't really a problem, then I imagine you would have little difficulty in saying, we're not going to allow you to have your hours till 2 o'clock. I'm representing somebody who says this, that every time I was approached by the police with a problem, I sorted it out. You want the door staff changed? I will change the door staff. He did that immediately. You want an ID scanner installed? I will install it. He did that immediately. So when he's made aware of problems, then he addresses them. But I don't want it suggested by Councillor Bayliss that it's clearly been demonstrated that he knew about what was going on. He did not. So what is the way forward? Well, I know as well as you do that the fact that the responsible authorities and the very people who are bringing the review, the police, are urging this course upon you doesn't necessarily mean that you have to accept it. But the DCMS guidance urges you to regard the police as your primary source of information and intelligence on crime and disorder. And if the very people who are bringing the review say, we are content with these hours, and we are content with these conditions, then it would be an unusual decision to go behind what is being urged by the very people that bring the review. There are important safeguards embedded into these conditions. The last entry is a really important one, because it means that all the people that used to appear from Wetherspoons and in drink used to be given unlimited access to the premises when the Kaplane brothers were operating them, that doesn't happen. So you've got Mr. Forte will be the DPS, a man with an impeccable track record in running licensed premises, and who, you will recall, it doesn't need repeating, ran these premises without complaint for 8 years. That is all I'm going to say. You'll be relieved to hear.
Thank you very much indeed. And we shall, of course, retire to consider our decision. Now, in order to do that, I believe that the rather technical staff have the ability to stop the recording for YouTube and to put people outside the scope of this meeting so that we may consider our decision in private. Is that right?
Chair, yes. We obviously have the regulations allow us 5 working days in which to come to that decision. Now, obviously, we're going to have a discussion about this, and whatever decision is actually made is going to have to be formulated into a decision notice. It's going to have to be formatted, and it's going to have to be agreed with the members, etc. And that's going to take some time. So, my recommendation to you will be that we will utilise those that provision. And so we will not be making a decision or announcing a decision, at least today. It will be announced formally next week. The normal practice rather is that we would email and contact all the parties and all the interested parties to let them know what that decision is. But that's how the decision will follow. But for the moment right now, yes, at the end of the live recording, then everybody will effectively be evicted from this current meeting, leaving the 3 members and myself and the Democratic Services Officer in support of you in making that decision. But everybody else will be effectively removed from the meeting, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, other councillors are agreeable to that course, I would imagine.
Yes, Chair.
Mr. Rankin and Mr. Saville, you're both agreeable to us adjourning to consider our decision and to give it later in writing.
Perfect.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Then I ask the technical officer to do what is necessary to conclude the public part of this meeting.